So a common question that comes up, particularly when it comes to the rehabilitation of aggressive dogs, and especially with board and train programs. And actually a client asked this the other day. They said, what happens if my dog doesn't show aggression while it's there? And this is a really common concern, but it's sort of a misguided concern. We actually hope that the dog doesn't show aggression while it's here. If we do our job right, it won't. It's a common misconception that people think you have to elicit the aggressive response in order to rehabilitate aggression. And that's just simply not true. The closest thing I can relate this to would be if you knew somebody who, for instance, had a drug or alcohol problem. We'll say an alcohol problem, and they went to a rehab program, a live-in rehab program. The rehab program is not going to have a fully stocked bar with somebody waiting behind it so that as soon as you go to make yourself a drink, somebody pops up and slaps you, right? That's not the idea of rehabilitation. The idea of rehabilitation is to put you into an environment where you can practice living in a healthier way and create new patterns of behavior. And so that's exactly what we want to do when dogs come into our program, especially when it comes to rehabilitating behavior issues such as aggression. Our goal is to not push the dog to the point of causing it to behave aggressively. The aggression, you have to understand, it's not really the problem. The aggressive response is a symptom of the problem being the way the dog feels emotionally about a given set of circumstances. And so our job is to help the dog feel differently. And we're going to start with easy situations and eventually progress the dog into those same set of circumstances that would previously invoke an aggressive response. But if we do our job right, by the time we get there, it will no longer evoke that response. So this is not to say that a dog never shows aggression while they're here. I mean, the world is not a completely controlled environment, and we do bring dogs out into the real world and train them. We do have people coming in and out of the training center for lessons, etc. So it's not a totally sterile and controlled environment. And of course, these are animals that we're dealing with. They're not machines, so there's a lot of variables. But as much as possible, we actually try to prevent aggression, because if we push the dog to the point of aggression, usually that means we push the dog too far. Usually that means we at some point either missed a sign from the dog or maybe even potentially push the dog past its point of trust, and we don't necessarily want to do that. And this is, of course, speaking generally, and there's always exceptions to this when it comes to aggression rehab. But that's often the way it goes. So the big picture is to always remember that the aggressive response is not the problem. It's the symptom of how the dog feels inside, of how the dog represents its set of circumstances on an emotional level. And rehabilitation is not about pushing the dog past its threshold. It's about showing the dog or allowing the dog to practice living in a healthier emotional state, starting with situations that the dog is capable of being successful and progressing into more challenging circumstances, the same set of circumstances that previously would have been problematic, but hopefully this time we're able to get the dog through it. And that's the benefit of a board and train, because we can control the environment so carefully, and we can be very particular about the circumstances that we'll put a dog into.